Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody. This is Mark Simmerling from Lawrence Berkeley Lab. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes here.
Well, hello everyone. This is Chris Loman at the Department of Energy in DC, and I want to welcome you all to the webinar here where our experts from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and other groups are going to present to you on driving demand for the middle-income energy improvements and how to address housing issues around that segment. This is a key element of any program out there that is trying to drive energy efficiency using private market mechanisms, is hitting that heart of the market where homeowners who make up such a huge amount of energy consumption, such a huge amount of square footage ownership, and such a large population are caught between a rock and a hard place right now, tight on finances, but looking for ways to upgrade their homes at the same time and do it in a way that works within their financial means right now. LBNL has done some fantastic work researching this, reaching out directly to real programs and real lenders and real project managers who are doing this sort of work, gathering their insights. And this is one of the things that we're going to be able to benefit from on this webinar, is talking about how these tangible programs, tangible activities have been interacting with the market and what can be done going forward for you all and for others who are trying to put these actual programs into place and implement these sorts of changes. So we're very happy that LBNL has used some of our funding to do this. And with that, I'll introduce Mark Simmerling from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab.
Great, thanks, Chris. Before I get started, we do have a couple more webinars coming up in the next month or so, and it just recently announced in-person Middle-Income Energy Efficiency Forum on March 26th. That will be running just before the start of the ACI conference in Baltimore, Maryland. For more information on all of these resources, please visit the website at the bottom of the screen, middleincome.lbl.gov, and I'll re-show this link at the end of the presentations. We're really excited to have a fantastic set of panelists with us today, and in the spirit of efficiency, I'm going to give all of their introductions at the beginning, and then I'll give a brief presentation highlighting some high-level results from our recent research on delivering energy efficiency to middle-income households. Gavin Hastings is the manager of the Home Performance with Energy Star and Residential Financing Programs for Arizona Public Service, APS. Prior to joining APS, he managed a BPI and Weatherization Training Center in Phoenix, Arizona. John Ahern is a program manager for NYSERDA's Residential Energy Services. He's responsible for the Home Performance with Energy Star and the Low Income Empower New York programs that together delivered efficiency services to over 16,000 households in the past year in New York. He also manages the Residential Revolving Loan Fund that NYSERDA has been operating, and he's been with NYSERDA for over 17 years. Neely Crane-Smith comes to us as the Communications Coordinator for the Center for Energy and Environment. It's a Minneapolis-based nonprofit that provides research, energy programs, and financing to help homeowners, businesses, nonprofits, and governments save energy. With a background in community organizing, Neely provides education and outreach for CEE's residential programs, as well as general marketing, website management, and social media wrangling. And finally, Mark Wolfe serves as the Executive Director of the National Energy Assistance Directors Association and the Energy Programs Consortium. NEADA represents the state directors of the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP, and the Energy Programs Consortium is a national nonprofit organization providing consulting and related technical services to state energy offices. So with that, I want to jump into some of the results from our recent report. First, we defined middle income as the middle third of U.S. households by income, those earning roughly $32,000 to $72,000. As you can see from this graphic, this definition overlaps with HUD's low and median income designation in many states. But given geographic variances in cost of living, this definition is really a rough national cut, and many of the findings from the report are likely to be relevant for targeting households both above and below our income definition. We focus in the report on single-family households, and the reason for that is the vast majority of middle-income households live in single-family homes, 83% of them. And the majority of those are homeowners. More than 2/3 of middle-income households own their own single-family homes. Again, the explicit focus of this report. What we also found was that while over 1/3 of middle-income households qualify for energy assistance programs like the weatherization assistance programs, these households are heavily concentrated in multifamily rental units. So just 6% of single-family middle-income households qualify for weatherization. And what that means is that, effectively you have middle-income households that are concentrated in single-family owner-occupied homes, and most are eligible for the same efficiency incentives available to their higher-income peers who may earn several multiples of their income. And so, this is naturally then a challenge. And what we found was that motivating these homeowners to invest in efficiency is a difficult task. Many of the same strategies outlined in our 2010 Driving Demand report, the link to which is on this page. And I should note that these slides will be available after our presentation on our website. But many of the same strategies are appropriate for middle-income households, but we also found that the tailored strategies for this segment are going to be necessary. And I want to quickly highlight a few to frame some of the presentations that we're going to get from Gavin and Neely and Mark and John. One of the really important strategies is reducing the cost of upgrades. It may simply not be realistic to expect middle-income households to make $5,000 to $15,000 proactive energy efficiency investments. And both Gavin and Neely will speak to some models that help to reduce this cost through approaches that start with the basics today, things like air sealing, duct sealing, and insulation, and encouraging more efficient choices when households make future replacements. Another approach is to continue to seek comprehensive interventions, but because middle-income households are more vulnerable to losses and underperformance than their higher-income peers, to reduce their investment risk. And John Ahern from NYSERDA will highlight New York's ongoing efforts to reduce middle-income household risk through its Assisted Home Performance with Energy Star program. Certainly trusted messengers will vary across income groups. We found that local nonprofits like housing agencies and CDFIs who are already well known in the community seem to be effective communicators. And it's also important to solve a problem that middle-income households recognize. These problems, too, are likely to vary across income groups. We think messages like maintaining the value of your home, your largest asset, replacing aging and broken equipment, and certainly saving money are likely to resonate with this group. And then finally, and both Mark Wolfe and Neely will speak to this, offering simple, seamless, streamlined services is really important for households as they tend to drop out of programs relatively quickly. Mark will transition us a little bit into addressing building structural issues. What we found is that many middle-income households have these issues or maintenance issues that can reduce their home's value and negatively impact the health and safety of their inhabitants. And while households are often aware of these problems, many are unable or unwilling to address them before they turn into emergencies. Things like ventilation issues need to be dealt with before making efficiency improvements, and addressing these issues as part of efficiency programs we think can both increase program demand and at the end of the day improve household outcomes. So Mark will finish our webinar today by speaking to some of the challenges and opportunities to mitigating these issues as part of interventions. And with that, I will transition to the exciting part of this webinar, which are on-the-ground practitioners. Gavin, please take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself before we get going here, again, my name is Gavin Hastings with Arizona Public Service, and I run our home performance program. We've partnered with another utility in the state, Salt River Project, and between the two of us in the last 2 years, we've been able to build a fairly exciting home performance program. We launched in 2010, and last year we were able to put up over 3,500 retrofits, so we're really getting off to a good start, and a big part of that has been trying to find ways in which we can better manage the costs for our customers. And so one of the things that I wanted to approach today is the idea of still striving for and achieving comprehensive retrofitting, but breaking it into a much more manageable process, and in doing so help reduce some of those lower costs. And so before I get started, I want to outline a couple of key things to home performance. Obviously, when you're trying to make a whole house program work, you have to create that demand. Certainly brand recognition, awareness, really getting to the core of the customer's needs are important. We're not going to go into that today, but things that we really do have to work on as an industry. Building infrastructure and is also important in how you develop the industry that can support this. And in my particular presentation, it's important to note that in Arizona, we deploy a contractor model to home performance, meaning that the auditor is the same as the contractor. And I personally believe this is a very successful model, a great way to deploy home performance. And the particular methodology I'm going to review today really requires you to have that particular model in order for it to be successful. And in part, what we tend to lose sight of is that in building that infrastructure, there is the training, there is the getting people ready to deliver this product, but ultimately you have to make contractors profitable. In order for the industry to sustain itself, contractors need to be able to make a living. There needs to be a financial motivation for the industry to develop, and so we constantly have to keep that in mind. So one of the big things we're going to be discussing today is, again, managing costs. And of course, there are solutions through rebates, incentives, and financing. And I wholeheartedly believe that these are things that are needed, and there's no one solution. So we have to continue to look at rebates and incentives and financing as a way to enhance how we deliver home performance. But what I really want to focus in on today is coming up with an alternative method to make project sizes more manageable as we specifically target the middle income households. So can you advance the slide for me, Mark? So here's a couple of challenges that I really want to focus in on today and in this presentation. And these are challenges that are lined out in the document that Mark and his team have worked on over at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. And 3 big points that are barriers to reaching this market is that customers are first really hesitant to make large investments, especially in the economic times when you put that comprehensive project in front of a customer that's $10,000, $15,000. That's a very sizable investment. Even when we have financing mechanisms in place that offer highly competitive rates and can help them manage that cost, there's still a lot of reluctance to adopt that financing and take that additional burden on. There's also a lot of uncertainty in the energy savings potential. If you're going to make that investment expecting an energy savings return, you want to be pretty sure that you're going to get that return. And there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. There's a lot of products that claim a lot of things. And so we're constantly trying to build credibility in how we are delivering that energy savings based on what we're selling our customers in the first place. And then ultimately, we also have the poor value proposition. If I am sitting there as a homeowner, I have a limited amount of money I can invest in my home, and I'm facing a $10,000, $15,000 retrofit project, I may often choose something that gives me a better property value impact, like a remodeling of a kitchen or something of that nature. And so helping customers understand the value proposition is something that's very important in this process. And this is not a fix to that. This process I'm going to review today doesn't change the impact on property value, but it does kind of change the perspective by which we offer the value proposition. So can you go ahead and change slides for me, Mark? So what I want to do first is take some time to redefine home performance. Now, when we look at home performance nationally and within each jurisdiction, home performance is touted as the comprehensive whole house approach by which we recognize the interactive effect of various building components and help customers make a very complete energy efficiency improvement. And while that ideal is correct, I think we often get stuck with the idea that anything short of a deep energy retrofit in a single transaction is a failure. And so what I want to do is redefine home performance so that we stop thinking of it as a project and more as a plan. Make comprehensiveness a multi-year, long-term plan, not a single transaction, one project. We still want to have our goals of 20% savings or greater or whatever percentage target you're looking for, but push that goal out to a longer term. We're also trying to create relationships through multiple transactions. Certainly, not only does this help us break the cost up over a longer period of time, but there are also some tactical benefits in having multiple transactions with the customer. Get the basics right. Many customers are looking for ways to invest, and what we have to do is recognize their needs and to get the basics done first, bringing that project size down, and make it manageable. Help them bite off as much as they can chew. You're still going to need financing. You're still going to need rebates, but put in front of them a $1,000 to $3,000 investment as opposed to a $10,000 to $15,000 investment. And then finally we look at the equipment, and the equipment's kind of the linchpin of this model. One of the things we do know is that the middle-income homeowner has to replace those major pieces of equipment in the home, the HVAC unit and the water heater. Those are sizable investments. They're something that they're going to have to manage. And what we want to do with this process is, A, help them get the most out of that investment, really optimize that process for them, but also avoid the crisis decision. If we get in there and we only sell, a portion of the project, and then we leave them alone, and 8 years from then, when the HVAC system goes out, if we're not there to replace it, they may get a unit that's installed inappropriately or is sized inappropriately. So we want to help them prepare for that crisis decision and avoid that. Can you advance the slide, Mark? So I want to walk you through an example. What I have here is a basic house, 1,500 square foot, built in 1970, central AC, about 8 years old, water heater, about 11 years old. Keep in mind I'm in the desert, so I apologize for the hot climate bias. Customers' motivators, or they have high energy bills and they want to work on that, but they also have some uncomfortable bedrooms that are a primary concern for them. Mark, go ahead and advance the slide. So in option one, and this is kind of more of the traditional approach, we put together the comprehensive 20% saver package. We take care of the CFL, some of the little items. We get some low flow devices installed to help deal with that water heating cost in a simple way. We also recognize that they need to have their ducts sealed, and that's affecting both their comfort and efficiency. We need to reduce the solar gain through the windows. We need to air seal that attic. We probably should upgrade that insulation. Right now it's an R19. We want to get it to about an R38. The HVAC unit's working, but it's not very efficient. It's pretty old, as I pointed out, and we'd ultimately like to get something more efficient in there. And then we'd like to get some more efficient hot water equipment in the house as well. And in total, what I'm putting in front of the customer is a $12,000 to $15,000 project. And that amount of money, as we said, can really raise some red flags for the middle-income customer. When they look at that amount of money, they're looking at a new car or college tuition for their kids, things of that nature. And so what we want to do in an alternative path is break that up. And so same exact proposal with stages. So we're going to get the basics done right first. In this particular house, let's reduce the solar gain in the window through the windows. Let's get the CFLs installed. Let's do the shower head. Let's seal the ducts, because that duct sealing is affecting their comfort driver, which is a big part of that decision. And let's tune that AC up and make sure that it's operating the best of our ability, giving them a $1,000 to $3,000 project. Still may need financing, still will likely need rebates to help with that project. But then we also stage out and we say, stage 2 for you is to take on air sealing and insulation. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen today. We can stage this out over a couple of years, and that way the investment is something that we can come back to them on. Go ahead and advance the slide. We want to look at those long-term objectives, and so we do have that water heater that's likely to burn out in a few years. We also have the new AC unit that's going to need to be replaced in a few years. And so what we want to do is create a relationship in which we're continually engaging this customer, helping them, bringing the attention back to these details, and helping them make an informed decision when those replacements are due, so they're properly sizing, properly installing. And most importantly, as a part of this, let's engage them in an ongoing tune-up. Let's do AC tune-up, let's do performance maintenance. That way we're in the house, we're keeping ongoing relationships with them, we have multiple touches with that customer. Please advance the slide. So how does this address some of the challenges? People are hesitant to deal with the large investments. If we can break some of those incremental, that investment up, we can make it smaller for them, easier to consume. We can also help them plan for major replacements so that it's not a crisis decision, so they're not just trying to put the fastest thing on that they can to fix their immediate problem, and help them make an informed purchase. We also want to, when we're addressing the uncertainty of the energy savings potential, by giving them a little bit, they can prove it out themselves. They can see the comfort improvements. They can see the impact on their bill and choose, based on that experience, to take the next step. And with the value proposition, again, we're making it a smaller amount of money, so it's more bearable. But at the same time, we're also talking to them about this conversation on what needs to be replaced. So we're helping them manage that investment. Say, we want to do this smarter. We want to make sure that when it's time to replace that HVAC unit, we're there, we do it right, and we get the performance that we want to get out of it. And so I think you have to rephrase and restructure how you put the value proposition, because that's a little bit more competitive than, say, okay, here's a $15,000 investment that we want you to make. Compare that to other ways to spend $15,000. Advance the slide, please. So what are some of the additional benefits? With this model, we gain some contractor sustainability. Ultimately, one of the things our contractors really struggle with is if they have a single transaction, it's make or break at the time of the initial sale. We got to get that $15,000 project. If we change the way they engage that customer, they can improve their ongoing revenue streams by having multiple transactions with that customer. And they can also reduce lost opportunity as they continue to work with that customer over time, instead of trying to focus on, I have one chance to sell my product and move on. From a programmatic benefit, we get an ongoing payout on that initial investment. We gain the ability to be more highly targeted, so that if I know someone's performance plan, then I can target them specifically from a marketing perspective on that. And then also we have behavioral opportunities that we can reinforce these improvements with the customers. Please advance the slide. So what are some barriers to success? Obviously, there's some programmatic issues. A lot of program designers, like myself, we build in auditing requirements, tracking requirements. We have incentive flexibility that doesn't allow for this. Policy, a lot of times we try to push that 20% objective, and we lose sight of the fact that it can be done over time as opposed to in one transaction. And the utility cost effectiveness, we make the upfront investment and we have to wait for a longer payout in the utility world. And in the contractor, we want to try to get them to adopt HVAC business models which have that multi-touch relationship, and not all the home performance contractors are capable of doing that today. And then also we have to add intelligent customer relationships to manage that ongoing process. Advance the slide, please. We have enhanced opportunities within this. We can integrate behavioral, things like home energy reports or behavioral incentives that help that customer continue to take actions on the behavioral side in addition to these improvements. We can do smart targeted incentives, special financing that can help customers take that next step, and ultimately better integrate it with in-home displays and smart meter programs. Go ahead and advance the slide. And so the things to remember with this approach is that we want to get to those smaller transactions, and to do so, treat home performance like a plan, not a project. Focus on getting those basics done right and make it consumable and kind of break through that initial barrier, and then make those steps manageable. And our hope is that in doing this, we're going to be able to reach more of the middle-income families and engage them over a longer relationship as opposed to one that just has to happen in a single transaction. So thanks, and I will pass it back to Mark.
Great, Gavin. Thanks very much. Folks, if you have questions, we're going to take them at the end of all the presentations, but you can enter them into the taskbar to the right of your screen. Gavin, just one quick clarifying question. Of the about 3,500 retrofits that you've done to date, can you give the audience a sense of what the average savings you've been getting is?
In a percentage of savings?
Yeah.
On the average, we are seeing the whole spectrum, of course, but right around the 10% savings mark. And what's exciting is that with the smaller transactions, we've already started to see customers cycle back into the program to take that next step and add incrementally more savings.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Gavin. We are going to quickly transition to John Ahern from NYSERDA.
Hello there. This is John Ahern. I'm glad to be with you today. I have some research that I'd like to report on. We conducted some market research in mid-2011. First slide, please. We conducted some market research in mid-2011, interviewed some 1,012 homeowners located across New York, and found that we wanted to find out how they view home energy consumption, the importance they place on energy-saving solutions, and why they would consider taking advantage of programs that increase energy efficiency. Next slide. So I'll run through some of the main market insights. We found that there's a strong interest in energy efficiency. More than half of New York homeowners plan to make home energy efficiency improvements, 87% of those within the next 3 years. Comprehensive home assessments make sense. Before taking energy efficiency, 88% are likely to obtain a comprehensive home energy efficiency assessment. Next slide, please. We also found that money matters. It's both a motivator and a barrier to energy upgrades. 72% say saving the money on energy bills is the main reason to make energy upgrades, with wasting less energy, making their home more comfortable, the second and third reasons. Most prefer to tackle energy efficiency project by project, something Gavin will be happy to hear. 79% would prefer to make energy upgrades 1 or 2 at a time as their budget and time allows. Only 33% say they would finance upgrades through a loan. Next slide, please. The investment thresholds differ by income levels. The optimal price point on energy upgrade packages for homeowners with income above $75,000 is $5,000, while incomes below $75,000 say their optimal spend is $3,000. We're finding that contractors are successfully selling larger projects, but still about 10% of projects cost less than $3,000, while 30% cost between $3,000 and $6,000, with another 26% between $6,000 and $8,000. So people do want relatively short payback periods. 70% indicate they would invest in efficiency if the payback period were 3 to 4 years. But again, our experience shows that customers will accept much higher payback periods. Our program average is over 10 years. Next slide. 68% recognize their home is not energy efficient. 56% say windows are not airtight. 46% say there's not enough insulation. 39% have energy bills that are too high. But many factors don't seem to make a difference when considering energy upgrades. Where a home is located in New York, its age, or the income level of the homeowner doesn't matter when when people believe, whether they believe their home is energy efficient or not, how much a homeowner currently spends on energy, or the notion that upgrades will improve the value of the home is also unimportant. Next slide, please. So our Assisted Home Performance with Energy Star program targets households with incomes below 80% of area median income. We provide a 50% grant up to $5,000 with low interest rate financing available for the balance. Assisted Home Performance has accounted for approximately 35% of our total production over the past several years, and last year we completed over 6,800 projects. About 25% of the total of 920 loans that have been made under our revolving loan fund, which was launched in November 2010, have been for customers that qualify for assisted. Next slide. Our revolving loan fund is capitalized by $25 million in regional greenhouse gas auction funds, with a loan loss reserve of $9 million, which is funded by the Better Buildings Neighborhood Program. We're offering two residential loan options: on-bill recovery at 2.99% and an unsecured loan, which is either 3.99% or 3.49% with auto pay. And both loans are for up to $13,000, higher amount if the estimated payback is less than 15 years. And the terms for the loans are either 5, 10, or 15 years. Next slide. Now, we have found that non-energy housing issues present barriers in implementing energy efficiency, and to help overcome this, loans can include up to $2,000 for health and safety issues, including asbestos abatement, electric efficiency upgrades, repairs due to water damage, molds, or mildew. The associated cost of up to 15% of the eligible work scope, up to $2,000, can be removed from the SIR calculation for determining the eligibility of the project. So
Great. Thanks, John. One quick question from the audience, and there are a bunch, and so we'll get to them in the Q&A. But did you all look at whether there was any relationship between the current value of a home and the amount a homeowner was willing to invest in efficiency upgrades?
I don't recall whether that was studied or not. Sorry.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is Neely Crane-Smith from CEE. Neely, take it away, please.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. So like Mark said, I work for a nonprofit in Minneapolis called the Center for Energy and Environment. Our mission is to promote energy efficiency to strengthen the economy while improving the environment. And one way that we do that is by providing community energy services, which is a full-service residential energy efficiency program. So on the next slide, you'll see the first step to the program, which is community engagement. So right now, the only way that folks can enter the program is by attending a mandatory presentation. We hold these across Minneapolis 1 to 2 a week, and this allows us to prime people for the home visit that they will receive to us, prepare them so they know what's coming, but also talk about sort of energy efficiency 101. You'll see my slide. It's the recipe for an energy smart home is good habits, good products, and good investments. Then at the presentation they attend, they have the opportunity to schedule a home energy visit, which is my next slide. Now currently this program is only available to Minneapolis homeowners in owner-occupied 1 to 4 unit properties. Our home visit is a 1.5 to 2 hour visit where we send 2 of our staff over to their home. We do direct installation of materials, so your kind of basics: compact fluorescent light bulbs, pipe wrap, programmable thermostat, high-efficiency water fixtures. We also perform some diagnostics. So we perform a blower door test, do a worst-case depressurization, check their mechanicals. We do insulation and air sealing checks for their attic and for walls. And then we sit down with the homeowner and actually walk through all the results, what we found, and then help them prioritize the actions. We only recommend energy improvements that have a payback that are shorter than 10 years. And then we tell people kind of, this is what we found in your home, this is what we suggest you do, this is how much it will cost, and here are some resources to help you. Now, right now, this home energy visit has a cost of $30. That includes the materials and the visit. That will be increasing in April, but for the past 2 years, it has been $30. Now, the next step is this follow-up. Now, one thing we found in this program is that it takes, on average, about 6 months for people to act on a recommendation that we gave them at their home visit. So while the upfront talking to people about how their homes use energy is really important, once we actually have them in the door, we don't want to lose them right after the visit. So the next slide will show you what we've done built in as follow-up. So a couple folks have talked about this, but home energy reports. We do have folks sign a data release that allows us to get their natural gas and electricity use from their utilities. We give them what we call a snapshot at their home visit, which is the last 12 months of both their natural gas and electricity use, and then sets a target. And then quarterly, they will get updates comparing weather normalized their energy use this year compared to prior to their home visit. Now, when we give people a recommendation at their home, say we tell them that they'll need additional attic insulation or air sealing, we do also provide a list of qualified contractors. Now, we do some quality assurance with our contractors, so all the insulation and air sealing contractors that we recommend, we help them become BPI Insulation Installer Certified. And so that's a skills training, and we perform both instruction and the testing. We also do quality control checks on 10% of installs, as well as proctoring visits. So we have an engineer who goes out with our contractors to make sure that they're installing materials properly, and then also quality checks, 10%. And we've developed consistent standards for our contractors to make sure that everyone is installing things properly and consistently among companies. Last but not least, we're also providing a home energy score, which is not on this slide, but you can find on our website, that shows people kind of broken out where they could be improving in a more visual way. So our results, which is the next slide. Right, and like I said, this is just for Minneapolis. Community Energy Services is part of a larger statewide project we ran called the Energy Efficient Cities Project, which was in 8 cities across the state, and there's a report on our website for more information. But in Minneapolis, between when we launched in 2009 to last week, we had performed home visits on 4,719 homes. About 95% of folks who attend one of our presentations schedule one of our home visits. Now, of those homes, about 75% do receive a recommendation for an upgrade. So that's either attic insulation and air sealing, wall insulation, or replacing older heating equipment. And of those folks, about 28% have completed at least one upgrade. So that's about 1,186 upgrades. Right now, our market penetration in Minneapolis is about 6%. So we are implementing some new strategies to try and improve our reach, including, like I mentioned, everyone has been required to go to an in-person presentation in Minneapolis. We are now going to be doing online e-learning, doing an e-learning course component. We're also adding some new measures, and we are expanding the program into a neighboring suburb of St. Louis Park. So the next slide is just my contact information. You can also find more information about Community Energy Services on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or Pinterest.
Oh, goodness. That's a lot of connectivity. Thanks, Neely. One question before we move on to Mark's presentation. What will CEE's Home Energy Survey copay increase to, and what is the subsidy that you're paying out on it?
Great question. Well, starting in April, like I mentioned, there will be 2 ways that people can access the program. If they attend a presentation in their community, it will cost them $40 for the home visit. If they do an online e-learning course, it will be $60. And the total worth of the visit between the materials and the staff time is around $400.
Great. And a couple of folks asking how that that increment is funded.
This program started with funding from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is recommended by the Legislative and Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources. We no longer have that funding source, but we are partnered with 2 utilities in Minneapolis, CenterPoint Energy, who's a natural gas provider, and Xcel Energy, who's electricity in Minneapolis, and also with the city of Minneapolis.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Neely. Okay, next up is Mark Wolfe, the Executive Director of the Energy Programs Consortium. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Mark.
Great.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about a project that we did over a couple of years that was funded by the Ford Foundation. It was called the Weatherization, Rehab, and Asset Preservation Partnership, quite a mouthful. We did it because some of our sponsors, especially the weatherization groups, have a real strong interest in how do we help low-income families weatherize their homes, especially when they go outside of the weatherization assistance program, kind of the grant mode. When can loans really help families? Let's click to the next slide. One observation I'd like to make that we found that was pretty important in our work, there's not a lot of consensus about what middle income is and which households fall under it and which don't. A lot of it is what the program definition is. And we tended to follow the HUD definition, which is similar to what NYSERDA is using, which is 80% of median income. That's roughly about about $40,000, $48,000 on a state basis, but on a local basis, that can vary considerably, anywhere up to about $70,000 or $80,000, even high-cost areas. So when thinking about middle income, we tended to think about pretty much people, around up to about $50,000 a year for a family of 4, down to about $30,000. That seemed to be kind of entry-level middle income, and then there's, of course, the level up after that. What struck us in our work, and low-income advocates use these numbers a lot, is that energy costs don't move up proportionally with income. So for a low-income family, because you still need a furnace, you still have windows, you still have to have an air conditioner, the cost of home heating and cooling can run about 16% of their total budget, when as you go up the income stream, that drops. So when you get to a family about $100,000 a year, it drops about 4 to 5% of their budget. So one of the things that's very striking is that energy for lower to middle income families is far more important. So when talking about energy savings to them, the possibility of saving maybe $500, $700 a year on their budget is far more important than, say, a family making $80,000 a year. The number just isn't as important to that family. As we looked at the homes in our program, and our goal was to weatherize, I think, we had 10 pilot sites. The goal was to weatherize about 2,000 homes. We saw the same patterns over and over and over again. It wasn't just a matter of, thin insulation. There also were problems with the roof. There were problems with the building structure. So we had to take a more comprehensive approach, but we wanted to use energy as the foot in the door because, one, that's also the programs that I know well, but also it seemed like a good, connecting program. And we thought about definitions. When we talk about, whole house retrofit, when you start to think about it closely, you're getting very close to work that has to do with the rehab of the building. So it's not just, replacing the furnace. When you start replacing the furnace, the air conditioner, putting in insulation, if you look at roof replacement, repair, window replacement, that's really starting to get into rehabbing the building. So in a sense, there's clearly a line to go to the full end of that and say, well, we're really helping to strengthen the ability of that family to keep their home. So now, if you looked at fully doing a whole house retrofit to that home, that family's in much better shape to keep their home, take care of it, to afford the cost of it. Let's shift to the next slide. So we looked at about 11 towns and cities across the country. One of the goals of the Ford Foundation, which in retrospect seemed maybe slightly naive, is that we thought, well, there are many programs out there. Maybe we can consolidate them, bring them all together as a one-stop shop for families in targeted neighborhoods. That seemed a whole lot easier than it sounded. And from even at the state level, it seemed like, well, how hard could it be to bring together housing programs with energy programs? You know, the first issue was, of course, definitional. Housing programs use area-wide median income statistics. Housing programs tend to use statewide income statistics. Why should that be so difficult to bring together? It's really just a mathematical calculation. Well, as we talked to people at local agencies, we started to see that as planners, things that we were trained to do, sort of analytical exercises that didn't seem that sophisticated, really became daunting for some of them. They were very uneasy about taking HUD data and energy data. So we started to see that one issue out there is just plain definitional. We don't have common definitions among government programs, and that makes it very difficult to bring together program resources. Nevertheless, we had technical assistance to help them get beyond this. We also provided them with grants of $200,000 a year to cover the cost of administration of bringing together HUD programs, CDBG, home with energy programs. And there really was just a lot more paperwork. And so one of the problems, I think, when you say, great, isn't it wonderful there are programs over at HUD that can help to complement our energy programs, we sometimes underestimate the additional administrative cost that's going to be there. And there's just no way around it. They come with different kinds of responsibilities. So we hired counselors at each agency, and they were responsible for helping people just work through the numbers. Okay, let's switch to the next slide. And what we learned there from the counselor approach is that not only did the families have, in some cases, leaky roofs, in some cases, insulation problems, but they also sometimes had lead problems, they had mold problems at homes, and in some communities, they were really organized for this. Milwaukee, for example, had great lead abatement programs. So again, it sounded fairly straightforward. Let's bring that program in as well. Well, you now have different liability issues. So each time we had to think through, revised paperwork. We had to think through how to help bring those different pieces together. What we also found through the process that I think was really kind of interesting is that many of the lower-income families that we were seeing, not only do they have high energy bills, they had high other costs that because of lack of awareness, lack of education, they just didn't know. One family we saw was paying $2,000 for insurance for their home, which was double the local average. Now again, that maybe for a well-off family doesn't sound that daunting, but when a family is earning maybe $40,000 a year, $45,000 a year, each of these pieces makes it harder for them to maintain home ownership and then take care of their home. Let's switch to the next page. Now, we started to look at the families and go, okay, what can we do to help them? We saw that there was, in some cases, a lot of other grant money available. For example, the home program or community development block grant program at HUD. In some cases, you can get up to $20,000 for a house. But those programs are not entitlement programs. So while they're good programs, they can only reach a small fraction of the eligible population. So weatherization, which can go up in some cases to 60% of state median, also is a terrific program, and you have grant resources. That can only also reach, at most, a few percent of the eligible population. So we started to look at both the underlying mortgage as well as whether the families could take on loans. Because if they could, then the energy savings would, one, help pay it back, but also at the same time, it would help reduce the burden of the house and the family. So what we found was that we were able to get grants for the families between about $5,200 and $77,000, which was pretty substantial. And then we started to look at, could they take out loans like the ones you have in New York, or could they refinance their mortgage? That was the other piece that was also kind of striking. Some of the families had very high interest rate mortgages. But they weren't necessarily behind the mortgage. They kind of weren't aware of it. So there really is kind of an awareness piece there, which I think ties into what we're learning about energy is, how much can you save on your energy bill through weatherization. So we started to look at how can you combine all these different pieces into kind of a one-stop shop. Let's kind of switch to the next slide. Okay, so what we learned from that was that maybe a mix of saying, okay, that some of the families we were looking at, many of them are low income, or lower income, or marginal middle income, and that, the best model for those families, and I think across the board within the lower income communities, there's this consensus that the best model, of course, is a grant-funded program, except, of course, grant funding isn't available for everyone. So we started to think, what about a mix? So that you could say, okay, what about maybe if half the funding came through grants and half came through loans, that the savings and energy efficiency improvements would more than cover the cost of paying back the loan. I think similar to the program they're using in New York right now. Let's switch to the next slide. So I think what we sort of came away from was this, that for well-off families, I think having a loan available and saying, look, here's the phone number for the auditor, great. They know the process, they're savvy, they're educated. But for families that are poorer and homeowners, we need maybe a more comprehensive package. These are families that are not as well educated. There are clearly trust issues with mortgage brokers and banks. Then essentially to have a one-stop location where you could bring those pieces together and then also address the related structural problems. For example, if they have mold problems or if they have lead problems in the home, you have a one-stop shop to help them work through the process. Because I think some of it is just plain daunting, especially when you look at the applications. If you've never dealt with these kinds of forms, or you do it with a certain amount of like, gee, will it really work for me? I think that can really help them. That can also help weatherize their homes. Because the thing is, even though the average rate of home ownership, I think, is like in the high 60% in the United States, for low-income families, it's about 45%. So even though they're poor, they're still homeowners. It's one of the remarkable things about the United States. Home ownership covers all income levels. Let's switch to the next slide. I think we already sort of covered that. Let's sort of move on. Okay, I think let's go on to the next. Actually, I think I've covered that one as well. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, the other piece that we did, and I think these two tables are very telling. When we started to talk about can low-income families or lower middle-income families take on loans, the question was, are they creditworthy? And I think there's a perception that a high percent of low-income families are not creditworthy families. And so we started to look at credit data both nationally, locally, by state. We access commercial databases to sort of access this data. We wanted to get a sense of, could you target loans, not just the well-off families, but also to those with lower incomes? And what's really striking from this data, maybe let's go to the next one where we sort of summarize some of it. What's really striking is that the percent of families with good credit scores with lower incomes is much higher than I thought. I think much higher than sort of commonly understood. So 54% of households earning less than $30,000, for example, have credit scores of 650 plus, and these are households that are homeowners. 63% earning between $30,000 and $50,000, which I think to some extent is kind of the beginning of the middle class, have credit scores of 650 plus. So again, that sort of suggests there's a high percentage of lower-income families that could clearly participate in these programs. And then as you go up the income ladder, 76% of those between 50 and 80,000 have credit scores of 650 plus. So what I think we learned from this was that there are plenty of lower to moderate income families who participate in loan programs. Families below 650 generally can't qualify for loans, for banks will make them. They have higher risk factors. For those families, they'll finance, credit counseling. There are different sorts of sort of intermediary structures that can be tried. But I think that the sort of lesson learned from both RAP, which was saying, gee, that there are plenty of lower income families that we could help with energy efficiency, and then looking at the credit score data, there's a considerable percent of lower income families that loans really could be an added vehicle both to either add on to grant assistance, or if grant assistance is available, just to help provide an alternative to, say, the higher interest loans, maybe that they're offered at big box stores, for example, if they have to replace their furnace. Let's go to the next slide. That's it. So anyhow, that's sort of covers our presentation. And if anyone has any questions or wants to call me afterward, we have a considerable database now of credit score data across the country by a zillion different factors. And I'd be glad to sort of talk about it and how that ties into ways to sort of help lower to moderate income families weatherize their homes. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. That's a wonderful lead-in to our next webinar, which is on March 6th, and is dedicated to delivering financing to middle-income households for these energy improvements. And I owe Mark a big thank you in that we used some of the credit data that he just presented in the broader report that we released at the end of last year. So just a quick reminder that you can enter questions on the right side of your screen, and I think we'll dive right in. So this first question is for Gavin, and it comes from Gerald Schechter. And he says, with the auditor being the improvements contractor, how do you address quality assurance issues?
Well, we have a fairly robust quality assurance protocol that we have in place. First and foremost, when they do complete an audit and they submit it, it undergoes a desk audit review. So we look at the information, we look at their proposals, check all of that. We also have a similar process when work is complete to desk audit the test out numbers, as well as about 20% of the completed projects receive an actual field QA review on top of customer surveys and other QA mechanisms. So there's fairly robust QA protocol. But at the same time, you have to try to facilitate contractors being able to make those transactions in a timely manner, and that's what we strive for as well.
Great, thanks very much. Mark, this question is for you from Rick Girardi, asking how old is this data on credit scores of low to moderate income households, and has it changed recently due to the recession?
Well, this credit score data actually, Rick, is just a few months old. Since the recession, credit scores have gone up because people have stopped taking out loans. I mean, it's counterintuitive. I thought credit scores would be deteriorating. In fact, they're improving because people are paying back their loans because they also can't get loans, so they're not taking on more debt. We actually compared data going back a couple of years. We saw some changes around the margin, but not a lot. More what you see is credit score data varies by location somewhat, that reflecting economic conditions. So in places where the economy has really deteriorated, that's where you see even higher income families a greater percentage with weaker credit scores. And where in better parts of the U.S. economy, you see much stronger credit scores across the board.
Great, thanks, Mark. Gavin, another question for you. Natalie Gray asks on option 2, which is the basic approach. She's wondering whether the ordering of improvements shouldn't be that attic insulation gets done first before the AC change out, ostensibly because it would allow you to right-size the AC system.
Well, in proposal 2, the attic insulation does happen before the AC change out. So the way that we tiered it out is that the basic package to begin with, insulation at about year 1 or 2, and then what you're trying to prepare the envelope for is ultimately replacing that equipment when it burns out year 5 or 8 of that process.
Got it. Great. That's helpful. Let's see. John, a question for you from Chris Wagner. He said he'd like to hear more on NYSERDA's finding that New York homeowners don't take into account whether efficiency upgrades will add value to their homes. This seems to be something that everyone is talking about, and your findings provide a different perspective, which is that it's not as important as people might think. Any thoughts on that? John Ahern, are you still with us? You might be on mute.
I was on mute, sorry. But I'm afraid I don't have a lot more to add other than the results from that survey. I mean, it's certainly the goal the golden grail is to try to figure out what energy efficiency adds to the home value, but that's been very elusive. So I don't have much more to add.
Great, thanks. Another question for you, John, from Vanessa Roanhorse says, how do homeowners learn about the loan opportunities in New York? Who is promoting the loans, and how are folks finding their way to the program?
Let's see. Well, NYSERDA does have a fairly active outreach campaign, but most of the marketing is through contractors. As with Gavin's program, we do rely upon a contractor model where the contractor does both the energy auditing and then installs the project. And those contractors have found that that their own marketing is their best way to engage customers. We do offer co-op advertising, so that if they use more traditional means of marketing, we'll co-fund their marketing campaigns.
Great, thanks, John. A question for the group. Could everyone just talk very quickly about the average retrofit size, the average loan size, and the expected savings? I know, Gavin, you had kind of already covered this, but if everybody could just quickly throw out those three numbers, it'd be helpful.
I can go ahead and get started. This is Gavin again, and our average project size is $3,000 to $5,000. When you add our financing mechanism into that equation, that average project size tends to go between $6,000 and $7,000. As for expected savings, again, we are, of course, targeting the 20% range, but we see on average achieve 10% with savings ranging from 5 to 70 in extreme cases.
In New York, the average project size is just under $8,000, and the average savings is just about $800 for about a 10-year payback. The assisted home performance, the average project size is also in that $8,000 range, but with the 50% benefit, it brings it down significantly.
Great, thanks.
And in Minnesota, I can speak to insulation. I do know that our average bid for attic insulation and air sealing, which accounts for about 75 to 80% of our upgrades, is around $2,000. And the expected savings, depending, the typical house that we deal with is a story and a half. And so the savings there are between $150 to $200 a year. And like I said, we don't recommend anything with a longer than 10-year payback.
Great, thanks. I guess one more question for the group, which is, do you have estimates of your per project program costs?
Yeah, I have that. This is Gavin again in Arizona. Our average estimate per retrofit is $1,750, and that includes total program administration costs, including projects that are just audits that don't actually result in an actual project retrofit.
In New York, I think the estimate is that the total cost is about 20% of the value of the improvements.
And I'm afraid I don't have that information in Minnesota, but I can certainly provide it if anyone's interested.
Okay, great. Thanks, Al. Albert asks, what type of report software, I guess this is for Gavin, what type of report software you recommend that would provide the type of output that you discussed as a planned concept, and maybe we'll direct this one to Neely as well.
Well, I think that there are a lot of softwares that are out there in the marketplace. I know that in my program we are primarily using CSG's EM Home, but what a lot of our contractors have started to doing is to augment that with their own kind of process tools. Certainly, we are also looking at web-facing tracking systems. CSG has a product called the InView that does that, but there's a lot of innovation going on in the marketplace right now, and so I would encourage you to sample a number of softwares before making your decision.
Great.
In Minnesota, we had built internally a sophisticated tracking program called Facet that we use for a small business lighting retrofit program. And so we internally switched it over to Community Energy Services and created C-Track, which is the database we use that also generates all of our reports.
Great, thanks, Neely. Next question is from Ken Zinn. He suggests that, as mentioned in the webinar, people generally want paybacks of 3 to 4 years, and yet few projects meet this threshold. And he asked whether people have found that by showing return on investment instead of payback, we might generate more interest, suggesting that showing greater than kind of double-digit tax-free savings or earnings on these investments in energy improvements might be more compelling. Does anybody have experience with that, or have any thoughts or reaction to a reframing away from payback years into return on investment?
In New York, they are. I'm sorry. In New York, they are presenting both the return on investment and the SIR. The contractors are actually responsible for the successful selling of projects with higher paybacks. They are able to sell their products, which emphasize health, safety, and comfort, and they're doing that much more successfully than our financial software allows us to do.
I think the other thing, this is Mark, I think that the numbers aren't that large. For most retrofit programs, and look at the amount that's borrowed in a lot of loan programs, it's like $8,000. And you look at the average energy bill, the numbers just aren't that great. I think, the problem is people move a lot in the United States. It doesn't add to the value of the property. For a lot of families right now, unless they have to do it, they don't. And so how do you get beyond that? We want people to do things that they don't have to do right now. Energy prices are low. It is a sell. You do have to sell this. It is a tough job to grow it, to a large scale. And I think we've spent a lot of time thinking about the product, how to design it, how to do the audits. What we haven't spent a lot of time on is how to sell this. And I think that's really, we haven't done a lot of the type of market research, like the survey that John did. I mean, we don't have a large database of that kind of information to draw from. And I think we need to put more resources into, basic market research to understand how to motivate customers and how to sell to them. And, the last thing is a lot of state programs, it's very difficult to put money in for marketing. Public service commissions don't like to see it too much. State legislators don't like to see it in budgets. It's very, very hard to get that kind of money set aside to do that kind of work.
Mark, I completely agree. And we actually did, of the folks who completed upgrades in our program, we did a segmentation based on age and income and the length of time that people had owned their homes. And we found that the length of time that people had owned their homes was actually one of the best predictors for whether or not they would implement upgrades. So we found sort of three bubbles there. One was new homeowners. So in the first couple of years, when people are already kind of thinking that they're going to have to put time and energy into their home, they're a little more mentally prepared for this. The second bubble was empty nesters. So when the kids have gone off to college, suddenly they have the control of their house again, and they're looking to improve it. And then the last and the most active group were seniors or folks who've been in their homes for 30 years or more. And that's just a long-term commitment to their home. They want to stay there. They want to live there. They're on fixed incomes. They want to be more comfortable. And we found those were the folks who were most interested in the program.
Great, thanks, Neely. And this is Mark Simmerling. I think one of the takeaways from the report that kind of both Mark and Neely touched on is that, in a sense, energy savings really matter. I think they're a hook across income groups, and for some, they're going to be the primary driver. But it's a relatively intensive process to participate in efficiency programs, and ultimately what we find is that you have to solve a problem that folks feel like they have. And for middle-income homeowners, they have lots of problems, lots of financial stress, but they also know that they have, existing problems, things like failing HVAC units that are in need of replacements, leaking roofs that have turned into kind of bigger challenges. And so, I guess one of the takeaways here is that for middle-income households, we may be looking at, and one of the benefits of kind of looking at kind of solving structural or equipment replacement challenges is that you can move away from economics that Mark is suggesting in a sense maybe marginal in certain climate zones, and into the realm of middle-income homeowners investing in the asset, in the largest asset that they have, and an asset that they historically have understood that they need to invest in. We're talking about on the order of $15 to $20 billion of annual home improvement spending in that middle-income cohort. So the extent that efficiency spending can be seen as just another investment in maintaining and improving the value of your home, we would do fairly well.
And I think the other thing is, Mark, that I think people sometimes forget, for a lot of families, if they have a home that's worth $150,000, we're talking about an investment that's equal maybe to 10% of the value of their home. It's really quite huge. If you have a home that's worth $500,000, it's a much more modest investment. You're not quite as concerned about will you be able to recapture that sale because it's only 2 or 3% of the value of the home. But if you're making an investment that's equal to a significant portion of the value, there's a real question about whether you'll get it back. And so I think there's a lot of economic issues that we need to look at. The other one, for moderate income families, there's data in terms of assets, that if you're a moderate income family, your total assets, including your house, might be $10,000 or $15,000. So we're talking about making an investment equal to everything you own. So that's another thing to consider. For them, it really represents a lot of money. But as you get into, more into the middle class and the upper middle class, it's not as significant an amount of money to them. It's still something they might need to borrow, but it's not daunting like it is to a family that's more marginal on the middle class side.
Great. One last thing to add, Mark. Without echoing what everybody has said, when you're talking about making the sale, and I agree, there certainly is a very challenging sale to make. One other thing I would add is that it's very critical that in any sale, regardless of income bracket, that you sit down and listen to the customer's needs to begin with. In many cases, what we've seen in our program is that the financial motivator is not the sole motivator. I'm in the low desert with 115-degree summers, and so a lot of times when a middle-income family calls us, it's because their house isn't functionally working, and they have other issues. And so if there is an other issue outside just the utility bill and the financial component, it's important to recognize that issue and address that customer's concern as a part of that project.
Great, thanks, Gavin. Will, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Will Velota, a question for you, Gavin. You mentioned that a few folks had already come in for that second round of energy improvements in this pathway to comprehensive. Looking for more information on kind of the types of customers that have come back, and wondering whether, in your opinion, moderate income homeowners are going to have the money to invest again in this kind of step 2 just a few years after completing step 1.
Well, first and foremost, again, we're very young in our program life, so we don't have a lot of aggressive research out there right now to quantify that in detail. But what we have seen just anecdotally in interviews with our contractors and what's been coming through the process, in my marketplace, duct sealing is by far the greatest rate of return and has one of the shorter payback periods. And so what we see with a lot of those smaller projects is they grab that duct sealing and are able to get a strong rate of return on their investment. More importantly, fix some of the comfort issues that they're also dealing with. And then when they see that next investment, it's typically, one or two measures, and so we are getting some traction there, and hopefully in the future we'll have better detail on exactly what those demographics look like.
Great, thanks very much, Gavin. John, just a quick comment from Stefan Adele suggesting that NYSERDA also is partnering with community-based organizations that have been rolling out under New York State's Green Jobs, Green New York program that are targeting marketing efforts at middle-income homeowners earning 60 to 120% of area median income. I think it's an interesting thing in that these CBOs oftentimes already have fairly robust existing relationships with the target income group that we're talking about. So it sounds like a particularly promising avenue of outreach. Okay,
Agreed.
last call. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
No, just that we are looking forward to the CBO outreach efforts and do look forward to a good increase in projects from that source.
Great, thanks, John.
Sure.
All right. Well, barring any last-minute questions coming across, I think on this note we will end the webinar just a couple minutes short of 1:15. I'd like to thank all four of our panelists for a really wonderful set of presentations. I certainly have learned a lot. And a reminder to everybody that this webinar, both an audio recording and the slides, will be available on our website, middleincome.lbl.gov, in a couple days' time. And please do visit the website, as there are lots of resources and sign-ups for the webinars and in-person convening that we'll be hosting next month. Thanks very much for joining us all. We look forward to speaking with you on the 6th.